Hi everyone, I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar. We will be starting in about 3 minutes, so just wanted to say hello and let you know that in about 3 minutes we will begin with our webinar at 1/2 past the hour. Hi. I'd like to welcome you to our Unanet webinar series. Today, our webinar is going to be on the topic of exploring Unanet's invoice formats. My name is Gwen Hess, and I'm a senior technical trainer within Unanet University. And I'm joined today by my colleague, Raul Quinones, who is a customer success manager. Raul's going to be handling your questions, and as we go through the webinar, if you have a question, please go ahead and type it into the question area of the GoToWebinar, and Raul will be answering some of those on the fly, and others he'll be kind of grouping together for us to chat about at various places within the presentation. So just a couple of things that I wanted to mention also is that if you should have any internet delays or lag in response time or see something like your audio is not available or anything, then what we want to recommend is that you just quickly drop off and reconnect back on, and it will work every time. Just sometimes there are a few technical glitches that happen. Also, before we get started, I wanted to note that we are recording this webinar, and it will be posted in our Unanet Knowledge Center in a few days. And our Knowledge Center can be found by just going to kc.unanet.com, or you could type out knowledgecenter.unanet.com. And that is where our Knowledge Center is located. One other thing before we get into today's webinar is I do want to remind you and invite you to come to our annual Champions Conference. And really what you are most interested in is that they get that invoice paid. And the way that you can ensure that those invoices come back to you paid is that you've given them a correct invoice in a format that they want to see it in. And so you can, by utilizing the invoice format functionality within Unanet, you can create invoices that are going to meet all of your customer requirements. So we're going to kind of take a look at what some of those invoices might look like and how we're going to achieve those customer requirements. So you might have a customer that just all they need is a simple one-line invoice. Here's the amount. It's due now. Here's what the inception to date is. Maybe that's all they want. Maybe, however, they want to see a summary page that's broken out by task within project, and maybe a detail page that goes along with that that would include date, hours, rate, comments even, and totals. Or maybe you've got a cost plus project and you need to break this out by labor, ODCs, indirects, and fees. Or you might have that customer who wants a summary page broken out by project and labor, by person, and then they want to see another level of detail on that where it's broken out with, you know, labor by task, by labor category, by person, with a pre-billed labor offset, and then maybe they just want it, now I want it all detail as well of people with their names and the actual date and the number of hours, and they want to see all of that. Well, guess what? Unanet does support every bit of that because Unanet can give you that type of detail all in one invoice. So let's look at how we're going to accomplish that. First, we kind of need to think about, well, who can make these types of changes in Unanet and where are they going to make those changes? So we know that Unanet is a roles-based system. So if we're thinking about which roles can make changes or create invoice formats, certainly the administrator has that capability, but also the P&R administrator, that's the project and resource administrator. They also can set up and modify invoice formats. And that's done in Unanet by going under Admin, Setup, going into the Accounting section, and going to Invoice Formats. And this is where you will see a list of your existing formats that you have in your system, the capability of editing any of these with the Edit pencil, and we have a brand new piece of functionality that just went in just a few weeks ago, and this is the capability to copy an existing invoice format, rename it, and modify it. So you can now have the capability of doing that as well with the copy icon. Or you can, of course, go and click on plus invoice format and create a brand new invoice format from scratch. So now that we know the who and the where, let's take a look at the how. So once we've gotten into that either creation of a new invoice format or editing an existing one, you'll notice that we have these different categories of the types of things that could be included on your invoice format. And we call these sections. So you'll hear me talk about a T&M labor section or a cost plus section or even the summary section, which is at the front. And so you see that all of these are available as you are creating an invoice format. And so that means you actually can create an invoice format that would cover being able to pull together multiple projects for the same customer on one invoice, and that would include time and materials, fixed price, and cost plus. You can pull multiple projects together and put that all onto one invoice. So let's first take a look at this summary section too. Oh, yes, that was you can put them all onto your one invoice. So let's take a look at this. There are a few sort of overarching controls that we want to look at that are a part of this summary section tab here. Let's take a look at this. There's a show charge breakdown that can be checked. And then there are also these grouping by projects and grouping by tasks. So this is something we're looking at the summary overarching level. So when we have this show charge breakdown checked, when it's not checked, that means that the invoice is not going to contain any specific details. It's only going to display total amounts. Sort of like that very first invoice that I showed early on in our presentation today. There's no details else about it. And in fact, if you don't have this checked, all of these other section tabs will become grayed out and non-selectable. But when you have that checked, then you get to add additional options to decide how much detail is going to be included in each of those sections. So let's kind of take a look at an example then. If we have the show charge breakdown checked, then our resulting invoice gives a level of detail. So it's taken this labor level of detail from our T&M labor tab. You know, what it was that we said we wanted that T&M labor section to look like. And so we're breaking this out by task and by the number of hours, the rate, and then a total over here. Now, if we did not have that show charge breakdown checked, we just get that one line that shows a total. So that's first how we're going to be able to show detail, is by having that show charge breakdown checked. So now let's kind of look at some other pieces that are still there on that summary control detail. And again, this is all just to show you the flexibility of how you can have different things to show. These three items here on show inception to date amount, show invoice to date, or outstanding AR balance, if you have those checked, then we're going to see a resulting invoice that shows an inception to date column. It's going to show a invoice total amount to date, and it's also going to show the AR balance. So you can see you're already being able to start building out what your client may want their invoice to look at. You could have some of these boxes checked or all of them checked. Just really depends on what you're wanting that invoice to look like. So let's take a look now, still within that summary section. Remember, we talked about there was some overarching grouping by project and grouping by task. So let's take a look at those as well. So if we check the group by project, then we've got some additional options that you might want to show as well. You might want to also show a funded value, a remaining project funded value. If you have an order number that's on that project billing setup page at the project level, you can say, yes, I'd like to show that. And then you could also go down and say, I also want to group it by task within that project. So if you are putting funded values on your tasks, you have an option of showing those as well. And also, there's a drop down. You could say at what level you want to show a task header. So if you had different subtasks, you could say, I want to show it at the 1.1.2 or whatever levels in that drop down. So if we want to see what this kind of looks like, if I'm saying I want to group this by the project level, that's going to show me that project at the top. If I had an order number, I didn't happen to have one on this project, but I had said I wanted to display it, so it's got it there, just not populated. I said I wanted to display the funded value, and it shows me that, and I wanted it to display the remaining funded value, and it did that as well. Now, if I wanted to go a little bit more detailed and say, let me also show that at the task, let me group it by task, then I again get this breakout underneath of project of a task. This one does not happen to have a funded value or remaining funded value on it. I just wanted to show you that you could include those as well. And then I have for the section tab for my labor, the level of detail that was listed out there. And so if I had another task, then I would see another task breakdown here underneath and the detail for it, and so on and so forth. So let's talk a little bit more about how to set these and kind of know what you're getting as you're going along without having to generate invoices and see what they look like. And you can do that by using in Unanet the invoice format preview. In a little while we're going to go into Unanet and take a look at what the invoice format setup looks like. But on the right-hand side of that screen, when we get into setting up an invoice format, there's this section that shows a preview. So whatever we set up, it's going to show a little preview over onto the side of what these things might look like. So it says my logo is going to be up here. If I have a bill to, it'll show up here. If I have a ship to, it'll show up here. These things are, you see, they're like optional. If I've not selected to show contract number, then there's not going to be anything that says contract number up here. It'll just be blank space. And then the level of, the overarching level of project breakout, I've said I want that, so it's going to show up like this. So this is an example of what that would all look like. So if I had that as my preview, and then I wanted to say, well, what did my invoice look like that I generated out from this? Oh, I'm sorry. Also, I wanted to note, I did highlight this up here. If you make changes on the format, you just click the refresh preview, and it'll show up in this section over here. I got a little ahead of myself. So, for example, if we wanted to, I took out the show remaining funded value, so I don't see that down here on this. This is how I invoked this preview that did not have a remaining funded value. And so now I can show you this is an invoice that I generated out of Unanet. So that logo showed up here. I did have a bill to and ship to, so they both showed. But I didn't have like a project number or order number or any number of other optional things on the right upper header portion. So you can see that it only populates those things that I asked it to populate. And then down here, it shows up my customer information and my funded value, and then I did just a little cut and paste of showing another project here so that you would see that I was getting those types of breakouts here. So you can see that you have a lot of flexibility in what you are setting up and how you can show things. Now, everything we've looked at so far, I've only talked about by doing different things on that summary section tab. So now, let's say, how do we want to invoke changes maybe in the time and materials labor? Because remember, there was a tab for that. So here's a section for the time, materials, labor. When I go into that, I can start seeing, oh, I can actually change the name of what this section is called. I don't have to call it T&M labor. I could name it something else. I can show up to 3 additional columns of information, and I can also rename those. Like if I want to show the labor categories on my time and material labor, but I don't want it to say labor category as a heading. I want it to say job class. I can just type job class over here. I could also leave this blank and not have a heading at all. If I wanted to subtotal by this, I just check on the subtotal checkbox, and then I can say, what do I actually want to show for this time that I'm going to have listed out? Well, I want to show my amount, obviously. I can show hours. I can show what the rate, the bill rate is. I also could show any comments that were on a timesheet cell if I wanted to get down and like show the work date, level of detail. I could also show inception to date hours. So maybe if I've been, budgeting things out by hours, and I could show how many hours are out there, because maybe people, maybe my client wants to see how many hours within that labor category since the beginning of this project have been used. So again, a lot of flexibility on what I can choose here. So just to kind of show you what that looks like, this is what I would see on that preview side. When I made these changes on the left on the invoice format, my preview side would show me that I've got T&M labor, which is what I call the section, and my labor categories, which are going to populate, on the actual invoice, but I've made that header be job class. Oops, didn't mean to click it quite that quickly, but you can see this is how now my invoice, when I've generated it, shows itself. I have that section header of T&M labor. I have the detail header, it says job class, and then I'm listing out my labor category. This one happened to have not had any hours for that particular one. Here's my second, because remember I said to subtotal it by this labor category. So I have total for job class. Notice it did not call it labor category, which is what we call it in Unanet. It called it what I gave it as the header. So the total for job class business analyst was nothing this period, but inception to date of 1,560. Then I go to my next labor category, and I see the number of hours and the like. I didn't quite capture the total line underneath of it, but it would say total for job class clinical writer, and then it would have a subtotal at the bottom of those lines as well. So you can see, again, a lot of flexibility. You have a lot of options on how you want to do this. So let's just kind of step through another one of those. So here's one where I've made some different changes. Now I'm going to not only show labor category and job class, I'm going to show the person, but I want the heading to be name. Also, instead of calling this T&M labor, I've changed the section header to say time and materials. And I'm only going to show the amount and the hours on this one. So again, I can see that this is what my invoice preview looks like, that it tells me it's going to do the labor category and last name, first name under headings of job class and name. I've asked for it to show the hours, and I've also asked it to do a subtotal by the labor category. So that's what my preview looks like. And when I run an invoice for that, then this is what my invoice now looks like. So I've got it's sort of listing out the different labor categories with a heading of job class. Notice that my section header says time and materials instead of T&M labor. And now I have got by name within those labor categories, the number of hours, the totals. I've kept my inception to date, and I've kept my subtotals at the labor category level. Again, lots and lots of flexibility with doing this. Now, Before we move forward and look at some of the other section tabs, I want to take a step back and look at another very key element of what is showing up on the invoice, and that is what you have done on your project billing setup. So I'm looking now at a project in my little demo system I've got here, and here I've gone to a project, I've gone to, in the left navigation panel, I've gone to billing, invoice setup, and here I can see that I have set this project up to be a lead project, meaning that I have two other projects that are going to all invoice together. So not only is it my reconstruction, but my content production and my study, all three projects are going to be invoiced on the same invoice. I've selected which invoice format that I want to use. I've selected my number format, my payment terms. And then if I look over to, I'm going to skip the contact for a moment, and if I look at the additional invoice formats, I've noted I want two more formats included here. Remember very early in the presentation today, I said maybe you've got that customer that wants their front page to look one way, then they want to see another level of detail, and then they want to see yet a third level of detail. Then these different invoice formats, if you will, get concatenated within the overall invoice that you're going to generate. So that standard invoice setup that I had on the first tab here, that I said that's the one I want to use, and then I additionally want to use these others. So now I can generate that invoice that has all different types of level of detail on the supporting pages that my customer wants to see. This is actually one of my favorite things that the whole invoice formatting does. So now let me go back to that contacts tab on our project billing setup, and here's where we can show whether we want bill to or ship to or both. Usually you're just showing a bill to on your invoice, and your ship to would be blank. You're picking your remit to, which is the where do they send the check when they pay, and then you also get to pick your invoice delivery method. We aren't going to talk about that as a part of invoice formatting. I just wanted to show you that that was another part of your billing setup. And then the last part of that project billing setup is what are some of those other things that I want to make available to show up on that header? Do I want to show a company logo? You know, remember I had a spot for it on my invoice format when I was looking at that preview, but if I don't supply it with a company logo, which is, you know, it's going to be blank there. You know, just like, you know, the other things, if I didn't supply it with a contract number, you know, it's just going to be blank. So I can supply it with a company logo. I can tell it what I want to include. If I wanted to put in a contract number, I would just check the box and type in the contract number at the project. If I want to include something in the description area of the invoice or in the memo, invoice memo area, I would put them here at that billing setup at the project level. So these are all things that are going to invoke how you are actually putting together that, how that invoice is going to look at the end. You know, Raul, before I go any further, because I'm getting ready to talk about the expense, time and materials expense, and then we're going to go look into Unanet. Do we have any questions that we need to address so far?
Hi, Gwen. Yeah, there's a couple that came in. We can ask them now.
Okay.
See. The first one here we have is how can we get a task to show if there are no charges against it, so we can show the funded and remaining funded value for each task on the invoice.
Okay, so you're wanting to show the expense type and show the amount. And so again, looking at this from our preview, we would see that header, we'd see the expense type, and we'd see that we're going to do the amount on the current period and the inception to date. And then we're looking at this now from an invoice perspective where I've listed out all of them all the expense types. I just didn't happen to have any expenses in this particular time frame, but what I have is my inception to date totals over here. So you can see, even though I didn't have any thing during that time, I still was able to show them because I had inception to date totals that I wish to show here as well. So I'm capturing that. So let's look at how we might make another change and see something different. Like another thing I could show is I want to show the cost element for the particular expense types. And then I'm just going to call that heading ODC grouping. And I also want to show that I've got a markup, a % markup on an expense type. Again, looking at what that would look like from a invoice preview perspective. I now have my expense types. I would be showing my cost elements, again with a different heading. And I'm going to show if there's any markup what that is as well. And from an invoice perspective, this is a little hard to read, sorry for that. But I have my expense, I have my grouping, so I have a lot of these that are travel. I have one down here that's equipment. And then I had a 5% markup on this airfare, so that shows as well. Again, in the current period, I did not have any expenses, but I did have my inception to dates over here. Okay? So now, this is really hard to read, I know, on the screen, and that's why I'm going to go into the system in just a moment. But if we go to that cost plus section, one thing that you can do in any of them is there's this little like plus, add a section within this section, if you will. So here we have created multiple sections, one that we called labor cost, and then that way we could say what we wanted to show within that labor cost grouping. We happen just to be showing cost elements on these. I could have another section that I called ODCs, so those would show up, and I have another section called Indirects. So this allows me the ability to kind of have multiple groupings all within this cost plus section to show what I want. And the coolest part about this is you've got this ability to say which order that you want to show these sections here in. So let's just go ahead and quit looking at our slides and take a look right in Unanet, because now we can get into there and see things. So let me get over to my right screen for that. Okay, just a moment. There it is, I think. Champions Conference info up. Let me go over here. All right. So again, we're in Unanet. We're going to go to Admin, Setup, and in this accounting section over here, we have got invoice formats. So we can go into any of these. I'm going to go into this cost plus detail because that's what we're talking about right now. And so just like, let me make this a little bit smaller so you can kind of see a little more of the screen. Just like on our other discussions, there is this summary that kind of has these overarching, am I showing my charge breakdowns, am I grouping in any particular ways. I have that preview over here so that whatever changes I make, I can hit refresh preview and it'll refresh this screen to show it. Well, like if I go over here to the cost plus, here's where I could add different sections and give them labels and determine what are the things that I want to show. Like in this labor section, I said I'm going to filter it by my cost element type. So this is the one where I wanted to have labor. Right now I'm only showing a cost element, but I could add in any of these. I could show a person, I could show a pay code, I could show, you know, whatever is applicable to this section. Because I've determined that I'm wanting to go and looking at my labor, and so that's what it's going to end up showing over here. And so you can build out all of these as you wanted them to for your cost plus. But if you needed to add more, then you can always say, let me add another cost plus section, give it a name, let's put it up here. We'd say, what is the order I'm going to show this one in? So, do I find, what is my collection order? I'm going to, let's just say we want to call this our additional indirects. In fact, we can just call that up here. And now I've got a additional indirect cost section. Now what do I want to filter it by? Maybe it's, by cost element. Now I can say, which one of these values am I using? And so you can build out whatever you need, again, showing the pieces you want, giving them, a heading of whatever you want, etc., just like we built everything else out. So I'm going to X out of that and not keep that. But what I want to do is I'm going to go, let me show you one other thing very quickly. Anytime you make a change, you want to keep it, make sure you scroll all the way to the bottom and hit save. Because if you change, you say, oh, I realize I need to do something in the midst of creating invoices, and you change a format to include something different, and you go and regenerate an invoice, but if you forgot to come down here and hit save, you're not going to see that change invoked on your invoice. So word to the wise on that one. But let's go back into this standard invoice. This is the one I've been showing you in all of the slides that we've been going through today. And so there was a question about being able to show hours inception to date. There is an inception to date hours down here that we could show. So let's refresh this preview here and move over here to, let me actually put these in a different order so we can see that T&M labor at the top. If you're on your summary tab and you want these to be ordered differently, all you have to do is just move them, around to how you want them. So I guess I do have that T&M labor at the top up here. Oh, it's under, that's my pre-bill labor. Oh, yeah, because I'm doing it by task. So here is my hours, and here is my inception to date hours right beside it. So you can show that on an invoice. And actually, we are at that point in our presentation, Raul, where we do ask for any questions that people have. So do we have more questions that have come forth?
Hi, Gwen. Yes, we do. We have an inquisitive bunch today, so we're going to go right down the list and hopefully answer every question for everyone, because I think we do have some time here. All right. So,
okay.
So I think we might have covered this during this, but we're going to ask it again. So it was how to get the task to show if there's no charges against it. I think Megan tried. I think she didn't show. Is there a way to will it show? Do we have an example we can show?
Where they don't have anything against it?
No charges against it.
No charges against it. I don't know that I've got one in my system that doesn't have any charges against it. What we might have to do is we might have to take your information and get back to you with an example on that, because I don't know that I've got any invoices in my system that might have that. Let me just look real quickly here and see if I've got something. In the meanwhile, let's go to another question. Maybe we can come back to this one.
Yeah, and I think this is someone we covered a little bit before, but we're going to cover it again. Is there a way to show the ITD hours along with ITD dollars? So the inception to date hours along with the dollars.
Okay, so we want to do like inception to date amount. This is on our summary, so that we want to sort of get that inception to date dollar figure. And so we'll click that. I'm going to go ahead and just do my save down here. It's looking at it. another section there. It's wanting me to show more detail is why it's doing that. And so here I've got inception to date hours checked already. So if we go over here and we look at this as a column, let's go down here to, so we're at our task. Let's look at our labor here. All right, so I've got, this is breaking out task name and labor category, and by name I have the current hours, I have my inception to date hours, and then all the way over here on the right, this is my inception to date column, so I have the dollar amount of inception to date as well.
Awesome. All right, so the next question here says, we do not offer payment discounts and do not want any discount-related labels. Can we get rid of them?
You don't want any discounted labels. Well, where are you? Oh, like this where it says discount amount?
I think that's
I'm assuming.
Yes.
Okay, yeah. Now, this is a preview. We're in the preview section here, and this is anything and everything that possibly could be on a header, okay? If you don't have discount amount anywhere in where you've set up your billing, it's not going to show. So if let's see, I've got some invoices over here. Let me just look at previous and current list. Let me see. I think this is one that I was working along with here. I'm just going to go into the preview mode of this so you can see what this invoice looks like. And you'll see at the top, because I didn't have any discounts set up on my project billing or set up for within my billing setup itself, then discounts will not show up here at all. So unless you've got something for it, it's not going to show. Let me look down here and see if I've got task level on this. I don't. I'm going to regenerate this and see real quickly if I can answer the other question. While I'm doing that, do you have another question, Raul?
I do. I have a few more.
Okay.
I want to show both address and ACH information for remit to. I can see where to add the address, but how do I show both?
Okay, that's great. And I've had that happen a lot where people have asked for that. I'll get over there in just a second. I just want to get this generated here real quick. We actually do. Since we got into February, my dates all have changed. Let's do. Just want to generate this one real quick. Now, typically what we do in order to make sure that we are showing kind of both, we'll set up, when we're looking at a project, let me see if I've got a project here. Okay. You know, when we're setting up this information for the remit tos, because these come from your own owning organization. So what I would do is on that owning organization, let's see what it was for this one, IT PMO management. Okay, so for my IT PMO management office on my my organization address information, I would edit this to include the ACH down here as well. Now I can have multiple addresses, because I might use this for one invoicing for a particular customer and not have ACH info, or I might have another one of these set up that included ACH info at the bottom. So I can then make that just show up at the bottom of the invoice. Let me see where we're at. down here. Now, there's another little trick that you can do too, is that you can make this be just one line that goes all the way across, because some people will say, well, it gets kind of lengthy if I just have row, row, row. And there's actually a setting on, I think it's is it the summary tab that allows us to do that? Yes, show remit to as a single line. If you check that, then we'll just do it here and save it. Because you see right now my remit to is like that. And actually didn't need to save it, I just needed to refresh it. But you see down here at the bottom now my remit to is just one line going across. And so that can save you some real estate if you have invoices that have a lot of information on them. Okay. Do we have another question?
We do. So getting back to the TNM labor section, when we select Inception to date hours, the show rate automatically unchecks. Is there a way to keep both of these selected?
I don't think that there is. Let's see. Let's try something here, because I've never had to do both, but give me a moment here. I save that. Both the show and subtotal boxes are unchecked. Amounts be included in the invoice total, but not, oh, that's a cost plus thing. Let's try, if we say show rate, I'm wondering if we do, let's do this. Let's make it real simplistic here. We'll try a little something. So, yeah, it automatically unchecks it. I was trying to think if there was anything that we could do differently on our subtotals that would leave it checked. Tell you what, let's, Raul, can you get their contact information from the person who asked that question, and we will ask our development team if there's any way that we can do that, because off the top of my head I don't see how to do that. Let me try one other thing. No.
Sure thing.
Yeah, so we might have to get back to you on that, but we'll research it. Okay.
Let's see. We had a question here. It says, is the inception to date hours on an invoice a new feature or from a recent update?
Oh gosh, let's see. I am not for sure on that, on when it came in. I'm sorry. I honestly don't know the answer to that question.
No problem. We can find out and go through the help docs when that came out.
Yeah.
This is an interesting question.
Yeah.
Is there a way to change the invoice at the top of the page to something else, like labor detail? Then when you highlight it.
No. Unfortunately, that's just the way it's going to be.
All right.
Now, one thing you can do, I mean, some people do little things with this description section where that they can put in some sort of verbiage that makes their customer more happy, if because you can't change where it says like invoice. I've had a lot of clients who have just some sort of statement that they put in here. It's done at the project billing setup, at a per project basis, but they've put in certain verbiage that makes certain clients happy. And they also use the invoice memo down here, because both of these again are set up at the project billing setup, and a lot of times people use this also for additional information that again satisfies that customer requirement.
Awesome. Thanks, Gwen. Okay, we have another question here. Let's see, we're still good on time. I have a client where the project has 2 tasks. The client wants to separate the invoice for the second task. Is there a way to create an invoice by task without having to create a separate project?
Well, you can, but it's tricky. It's the best answer that I can give. When you are doing your invoicing, let me come over here and see if I got this invoice that I was creating to over here. Let me just open this up. I think this is where, well, I forgot what I added on here to make something show. Anyway, you can edit your invoices. Let's say, for example, that you knew which labor, like which labor goes to which task here. So let's say that you needed to break out and put brand strategy on a separate invoice. The only way really to do that is to come in here and select all of that task, all their pieces, both their labor and their expense if you had any, defer them, generate this invoice and get it completed, then go back and create another invoice without posting any additional labor. So then the only items that will show up are these ones that you deferred. And then you could generate another invoice and it would only have these elements on it. That's really the only way to break out your tasks into two different invoices without having them as separate projects. But remember, they're within the same invoice. I'm just going to get out of this. I don't want to defer those. They're within the same invoice. So if you have other information, your inception to date will be the same across the things that you have displaying. But if you're, you might have to throw out a page or something out of your invoice. You'd have to play around with it. We've done it. I've helped clients set it up to do that. It just is a little tricky because you got to make sure you're deferring all the stuff you want to defer, both labor and expense, and then generate them separately.
Awesome. Thanks, Gwen. Let's see. We have another question here. Thanks to everyone for these questions. These are some fabulous questions. If we don't get to all of them, we'll make sure that the CSM reaches out to anyone whose question we didn't get to today. The next question we have here, we're currently using additional item to include our monthly award fee, which has its own task number. Remaining project funded value does not update for that item. Is there a better way to do this so that the remaining task funded value updates accurately within the invoice?
Okay. So I would say the easiest way to do that is to create an expense type for that, then create an expense report against that expense type so that it actually shows up differently on your invoice, and then that's going to reduce down your funded value. Instead of using an additional item, just create an expense type to hold that.
Awesome. Thanks, Gwen. Let's see. Can you show rate and hours and inception to date hours at the same time?
Well, that was our question we're going to have to find out about, because we know we can do the hours and the inception to date, but we couldn't necessarily show the rate. So we're going to have to do some research and get back on that. Okay.
Let's see. Still have a couple minutes here. How do we get the funding value on the invoice to reduce each month correctly when inputting to the additional charges amount on the invoice?
Oh, again, that additional items question on getting it to reduce. I would want to actually ask some of the people who work have worked a little bit more with our Unanet financials, because they have, even without you having Unanet financials, you don't have to have financials in order to do billing, obviously. But I would say they have encountered some of those more trickier questions than we have in some of the tracking type of clients that I've been working with. So let's take that as another one of those questions that we would like to research and come back to you all with.
Absolutely.
Because I don't really know, I have not encountered a way to do that in what I have worked on.
Thanks, Gwen. Let's see. Are you formatted to print on the government form 1035?
Oh, now that, let me look up something real quick, because I want, let me just look real quick and see if I've got anything here on that. Because I think I do. There is a Knowledge Center entry on this. I've not personally worked with a client that had to do this, so this is not something that I've had that with. But there is a Knowledge Center entry. All I did was I literally just typed in 1035 in the search, and I got this page. And this tells you how to go about doing that so that you can print out to the 1034 or 1035. So I would advise you to go to this Knowledge Center page.
Awesome. And we can send these links as well as some of our follow-ups as well, so we can get these out to you if you want the links. Let's see, we're getting with 2 minutes to spare here, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to halt the questions. For everyone who asked a question who we did not answer, and even those that we still have some things to follow up, we will follow, your CSM will follow up. I'll get these questions out to everyone, and then we can give you guys a call and make sure we answer these. But I want to thank everyone for sending your questions. We'll make sure every question is answered promptly as we can. So thank you for all the time, and thanks Gwen for answering all those questions.
Oh, you're very welcome. And in the couple of moments that remain, I do want to point out that we have our 2017 Unanet University schedule out on the Unanet corporate website. I just have a few of them listed up here, the ones for April and July. We also have dates available in October and December. As well. So just wanted to point those out. And also we have some more upcoming webinars. There is the conference, the Champions Conference tour is in 2 weeks. 2 weeks after that, we have about the new project control panel, which is an awesome piece of functionality to really be able to have really a report that gives you a dashboard of your projects. And then we're also going to have 2 weeks after that, on March 16th, Managers Top Questions Answered. So I would encourage you to sign up for anything that is of interest to you, and feel free to contact us for anything that you need, either your customer support manager, or if you need actual support, you can reach them at the support line or their email. And thank you very much for attending.